Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? One of the things I've found out is it's really important in any endeavor, in any area of exploration, any new subject you decide to delve into, that you learn the lingo, you learn the vocabulary. And oftentimes, what makes this particularly frustrating is, fields tend to hijack words and terms that we use in the layman's terms, in regular old vernacular. And so you have to make sure you understand what the heck they're talking about. And as I, explore more and more about game theory and different ideas and read about what different thinkers have thunk and all that kind of stuff, I need to learn the lingo. And just because I'm checking out things like the Forge and Ron, what Ron Edwards has thought and what Runesinger thinks and everything else, doesn't mean I always agree with everything these people say or think, all the conclusions. But I need to understand, the vocabulary. I need to understand what they're to have reasonable discussions with them, to understand what they're thinking, to make sure that I haven't missed something, not considered something that they've already considered, and to be able to intelligently draw my own conclusions. So I was reminded of this recently in this very brief discussion we had in a study group, very brief, about the pool. At some point, and Ron Edwards talks about in his little video on the pool about story now. And he was saying the part where the story was actually kind of emerging as a result of play. And so I'm thinking, of course, that's story now. That's what happens. That's not particularly, novel or interesting or narrative, right? But, in terms of, gaming lingo at this point, story now really refers to narrativism. And I'll give you I'll probably link his actual essay on that. So, I kind of asked him questions and kind of was reminded that that's now like a part of the lingo and means a specific thing, because I was misinterpreting it to mean, more like an emerging story. So, and there's a subtle difference. I'll give you an example from my other life. At one point, I was in the psychology field for a long, long time. Did a lot of behavioral psychology, actually. And so there's terms there that they've hijacked from the regular lexicon and vocabulary. Um, and people bandy about the terms positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement an awful lot. And what happens a lot of times is they tend to misuse things like negative reinforcement. And it's because, psychologists have kind of hijacked those terms so that the lingo is different. So, give you an example. You got a kid in the grocery store with their parent. Kid's crying. They want a candy bar. And the parent finally acquiesces. They buy the Snickers bar or whatever it is and hand it over to the kid. Kid stops crying. And somebody will criticize the parent and say, well, you just negatively reinforced that behavior. Well, that's entirely untrue. So, somebody was negatively reinforced in that example, but it wasn't the kid. So, I can talk about four terms. There's when you say reinforcing in this behavioral psychology term, what you're saying is what you're doing is going to make a targeted behavior more likely to occur in the future. When you say punishment, all that really means is this is going to make the targeted behavior less likely in the future. You're punishing that behavior. When you say positive, all that means is you are adding something to the environment that wasn't there before. And when you say the word negative, all that word means is that you're taking something away from the environment that used to be there. That's it. So we'll talk about four terms. Positive reinforcement. All right, so you get all A's on your report card. Your parents give you a new car, or maybe like $100. Maybe they buy you lunch. Okay. You've been positively reinforced. They've given you something you didn't used to have. It's going to make getting good grades more likely, especially if you get a new car. Let's talk about negative reinforcement. Let's go back to the grocery store. So, kid's crying. Parent there has this very aversive stimulus in the environment, which is this air raid siren of their child crying. So, finally, they acquiesce. They buy the candy bar. They hand it over. And the kid negatively reinforces them. Negatively reinforces that behavior by stopping crying. They're removing the aversive stimulus. So the parent has just been negatively reinforced. Or more specifically, the act of buying and handing over the candy bar has been negatively reinforced. And what about positive punishment? Okay, you mess with a nest of bees and they sting you, or they've just added something to your environment that you didn't particularly like. It's very punishing. Very unlikely that you're going to mess with a nest of bees in the future. And what about negative punishment, which sounds awful, doesn't it? Okay, well, you draw on the walls of your mom's house, and so she takes away your Xbox for a week. That's negative punishment. She's taking your Xbox, which was in the environment, she's taking it away. And it's making you drawing on the walls less likely. How about that? But lingo, most people, in layman's terms, will misuse the term like negative reinforcement, and they'll think of it in some way different. They'll think of it in a kind of like a positive punishment or negative punishment sort of way. It's not how it works. But just because you don't understand the lingo, just like in gaming, sometimes you need to make the effort to buckle down and understand the lingo a little bit more if you really want to kind of be under the hood a little bit more than normal. And I like to do that because I like to know what's going on. So that's my little rant for today.